Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing. Today's video is the difference in power between these two heads. I have tested them with two different intake manifolds and I'll share the results on both. So I did do a dyno test comparing both these same heads on a 406 small block Chevy. And the heads are, these are the Promaxx Project X 215 cc runner heads. These are the AFR Enforcer 195 cc heads for a small block Chevy. Those were dyno tested using two different intake I dyno tested with a bunch of different intake manifolds, but in this particular video, I'm only comparing two because both were using the exact same configuration on that head and then on that head. And those two intake manifolds will be the Trick Flow R intake that Trick Flow just released probably a year or so ago. It's completely stock, unmodified. And the other one is an Elderbrock Victor Jr. that has been port matched to a 1206. Both were dynoed exactly the same. Nothing was modified but on the intake or anything between those two. So in this video, you're gonna get a lot more information just that. I'm gonna show you the flow numbers from both heads. You'll see how the measurements from both heads, so as far as CCs, everything. And then I'll show you the dyno numbers as well, and you'll get to see how much of a real difference does it make. And I'm about to bust some myths. Because don't forget, that's 195 cc's, that's 215 cc's, this is on a 406. I know you're thinking, well, that one, the 195 cc should make more torque, because you've heard that throughout the internet, because people keep spouting that off. Velocity, it makes more torque. Velocity makes more torque. It doesn't hurt, but doesn't mean it's true always. So we're gonna get to see all that. But anyway, let's talk about some of this stuff, because I need to kind of pitch my stuff. Most of these results are in my dyno books. So for instance, the beginning ones for the AFR Enforcer heads, those are in the very first dyno book. And these are able to be purchased. You can go to my website, wengines.com, and you'll see a link to my online store where you can purchase multiple books from each dyno session I've done. I'm having a pre-order right now for dyno book number 3 for the small block Chevy, and that would include the tests for the Promaxx Project X. And many of the sheets you will see in here will be in that book. So it's on sale. Purchasing those books helps me. Look, I could tell you like and subscribe, and that's great and all that, but that doesn't really make you any money. And I'm not truly trying to make money. I'm trying to get enough money to do more R&D where I can go back and do some more testing, which I will do another session on that anyway. But that's what that's for. All that money really just gets turned back into doing more tests that you guys would be interested in seeing. So go to my website, wengines.com, purchase the book. They're pre-order right now for book 3. I haven't even had time to mess with the book, but I'm going to try to get it published maybe within the next couple of weeks, and then they'll be shipped out. I'm only going to make 10 more than the pre-orders, so I'll have those in stock, and after that, it'll just be available as a PDF. If you're outside the United States, you can purchase the PDF, but not the other ones. All right, let's get to the whole engine thing. So here's a breakdown of the engine. This is all from Dyno Session book number 1, in case you're wondering. All this information's in there. 406 small block Chevy. It's got a dart block. It's got a scat rotating assembly, Race Tech flat top pistons. It yields about 11.02 compression ratio. It's a solid roller cam. Here are the specs for the cam. The cam was never, the short block part of the engine was never changed. So this camshaft that you're seeing is the same one that was used for both heads, which it's a solid roller, pretty basic camshaft. It's 260, 270. I think somewhere on here is the specs on it, and I'm probably looking through the camera, so it's harder to see. But it's got a 688 lift, 108 lobe separation, advanced 2 degrees, and there it is, intake duration 260, exhaust 270. It was actually put on a Cam Doctor 2. And I'm trying to flip the pages while on this. Of course, they all stick together during when I was testing. There's the Cam Doctor stop, so you can actually see how much time it spends at each duration point. But anyway, that's in book 1. But this is what we're going to get to right here. So, just for the record, these are actually the AFR Enforcer heads that was used for this dyno, the first dyno session that you're going to get to see. These heads were completely stock from AFR with the exception of one thing. If you order the AFR Enforcer heads, you'll notice that they only have one spring configuration. That's for a hydraulic roller. Being that I'm a solid roller, what I did was kept all their valves the same, but I ordered they have a 700 lift spring and a titanium retainer, and all I did was switch out the hydraulic roller stuff and put that in. Now I did use shaft rockers And you don't have to, but I did it because I prefer to use shaft rocker. Once you use shaft rockers, you'll never go back. Besides the cost, they're nice. So in this case, it was used a Jessel Sportsman Series, a 1:6 ratio. Now I added the extra 350 offset, which by the way, was able to use the same shaft rocker setup on this one. So that's the AFR Enforcer head. As far as the Promaxx Project X, it was completely stock too. I didn't modify it at all. I didn't even have to change springs. I did take it apart to flow it so you get to see the flow numbers and such. This one's not the exact head that was used because the exact head that was used is still on the engine. However, this is what the head looks like with the exception of this. This is just a CNC softening of the chamber. This is done for a customer because it's getting ready to go on a power adder deal. However, that part was not done to the dyno mule, to the dyno session that you're seeing. I'm just showing you the head so you have something here for demonstration purposes so you can kind of see what it looks like. But that part was not done to the one that was on the engine right now, and that's the exhaust port. But it's just here for demonstration. The actual head's still on the engine. That one was actually used on the engine. All right, let's show you the flow numbers. These are from the AFR Enforcers. So that completely stock, flowed them, flowed all 8 cylinders, both intake and exhaust, flowed on a 455 bore, no exhaust pipe. All 8 were tested, so you can see they kind of vary. So if you look at cylinder 1, it flows 270, looks like at 600 valve lift. And that one, 262, 272, so it was really good there. 271, and then it falls off. See how they kind of vary? 271, 266. You get the idea. That's the flow numbers. The exhaust you can kind of see. They're about 200 CFM. Some are a little bit less, like this 197. That one's a bit better at 212. But they're all about that range. How does that compare to the Promaxx though? And don't worry, I'm going to show you sizes and stuff. Here's the Promaxx. Cylinder 1, looks like it does 292. That's pretty good. Cylinder 2, 302. This one did 307. But then you got 2 cylinders are they're lower, like 387, 385. This one, 304, but we got a really good one right here. It went 310. Now, granted, it was at 900 lift, but still. Then you got another one's back to 286. The exhaust, they're peaking about 2 in the 2 teens. That's 219, 217, 214, well, 216 right there. 221, 217. So it's fair to say, and I'm going relatively quickly because no one wants to hear me read numbers, but it's fairly accurate to say that these flow about 20 CFM more than those. So out of the box, this is an AFR, this Promaxx Project X 215 flows more than the AFR Enforcer by about 20 CFM. Now it also has a bigger intake valve, 208 versus a 202. They have the same size exhaust valve. But we also have 215 cc's, at least that's what they claim, but I actually measured them, where it's supposed to be 195. Now, let's get to that though, because that is different. So here are actually the measurements from the inside of the head. I'm moving things around so I have room here. These are the measurements from the inside of the head on the AFR Enforcer. That's this one. So if we look, you can tell its throat's 1.81. Bowls 1.908, but this is the one most people keep asking about. The pushrod pinch measures 1.975, so about 2 inches of cross section right here. That's where the smallest part of the port is. Same with the Promaxx, but the Promaxx is different. So let me flip over to the Promaxx real quick. The Promaxx pushrod pinch measured 2.29, so it's about 3/10 of an inch larger cross sectional area. Now the other spots are they're different too. That's bigger. All the measurements are bigger. Obviously, it's a bigger head. For the record, though, this is somewhat weirder. I did measure the links, so how long that actual port is. And I measure the bottom, and then I measure the roof, and then I average them. Do it on both. The Promaxx intake port measured 5.53 inches long. And I compare that to the AFR Enforcers, it's 5.43. So it's slightly longer. It's because of the bowl depth. It's deeper on the bowl. So this part, the deeper part, is more. Okay, how about the CCs? Because I know you wanted to know that, because that's not always the truth that they tell you. They might claim 215, 195. That's not always the case. Here's what I measured all of them. So the intake port volume on the Promaxx varied. They're actually, even though it says 215, 212, 212, 214 about, 214, 212, 213, 212, 212. How about the chambers? They're supposed to be 64 cc. They were 64 and a half, 65, 65, 65, 65, 60, I think 60, almost 66, 65, 65. Exhaust 72 to 73 about. But now that's the Promaxx. Now if we look at the AFR Enforcer, which hopefully I've got that pulled up closer. Yeah, this is harder to read, but in essence, their chambers were 66, 66. Their intake runners weren't 195, they're 197, 198, 197, 198. And their exhaust was 79 cc's, which is weird because that actually measured, a larger volume on the exhaust port on that one than on this one. And I'm betting it's because of the corner radius. This is more rounded, that's square, but the volume wasn't the same. So there's some of that. I did measure velocities, but I'm not gonna bore with this video. I'll put it in the book and you can read it then. Let's see if there's something else I want to share with you. I don't think so. So there's a rundown of the heads. So you can kind of clearly see the difference. Let's just get to the dyno numbers now. Okay, give me a second to get these out. I'm doing this one take because I ain't got time. I'm digging these. I grabbed the wrong thing, didn't I? Hold on just a second. I'm going to stop the video. My apologies for that. I should have been more prepared, but here we go. So here are the dyno numbers. Now the first one is, so again, the heads are pretty much what I'm showing you. That's the exact head that was used. This one's just for demonstration, but it's the stock head. And the intake that was used for this first test was this one. This is the TrickFlow R. It's completely stock, never modified in any way. And it was used just like this for the AFR Enforcers. And when it was on the AFR Enforcers, it did this. It made about 551.2 horsepower at 6,400 RPM. And it made 520 foot-pounds of torque at 5,100 RPM. That's with the AFR Enforcers. Now, just switching to the different heads. And I didn't write this on here, but here's how it was tested. It was tested with 1,000 CFM, 4150 CFM Demon carburetor. The jetting was never changed, which I'll get to that in a minute because you're about to see something weird. AFR 4-hole tapered spacer that they have, 1 inch. Exact same thing. So nothing was changed besides just the heads. Everything else is the same. Here's the Promaxx Project X. Now, I'm going to warn you right now because some of you are going to look at this. I'm going to get it in the comments, and then as they didn't listen to the whole video, ignore this air-fuel ratio. This is the measured one. So this one comes from the dyno. And the way that works is there's an air hat that spins, and that tells you how much air is going in. Then you got a fuel turbine that spins with the amount of fuel that comes through, and it calculates its AFR. Don't ask me why, but on this first one it was off. And I think the reason why is because before I went to, this is the first dyno test we done, we had to rehook up one of the fuel lines. So whenever the fuel bowl actually opened, it had to fill the entire line, making the whole thing look like it was rich. Do I think it was rich? Absolutely not. Because I'm watching the actual O2 sensor, and it's 12.8, which is the same it was always here. So what I'm trying to say is ignore that. So before you say, well, it would do better if you took out some jet. No, it wouldn't, because we backed it up and then it would have the same thing. So we actually did 2 more pulls after that. The power dropped by about 1 horsepower. And I didn't show you that because the water temperatures are the same between this one and this one. The only difference is because it had more runtime on it, that the air fuel ratios on this sheet look the same. Although on the O2 sensor, they're exactly the same. So what I'm trying to say is, this is measured. This isn't what the O2 sensor is saying. The O2 sensor is saying, you're good to go, buddy. Same as always. But here's the power difference. So remember, we made 551 before. Now, with just changing the heads, it's 597.3 at 6,700 RPM. And torque is now 527. So a pretty big jump. And I'm going to show you the overlay so you can see that. But I wanted to show you this because if you look where peak happens at, so cam's the same. Cam never changed. Intake never changed. This was just the heads. And if you look what it did to the peak, where RPM, peak horsepower occurred, 551 at 6,400. Well, now peak's occurring at 6,700 RPM. So having that 3/10 bigger cross-section at the pinch raised that up. The torque, though, 5,100 RPM before, now it's gained about a couple hundred RPM. It's 527. Now, this is the part you're probably most interested in, the overview. This is the overlay. So what you have in the red is the Promaxx Project X 215s. And the black, that's the AFR Enforcer. There is nowhere that the AFR Enforcer is better. That smaller CC head, because you know, you've heard it, smaller CC, more port volume, more port speed, higher velocity, makes more torque, especially down low. And nowhere from where we started the pool did it ever do that. It just didn't. As you can tell, even here, it just did not happen. Now I know you're like, well, why didn't you pull it all the way down here? We just didn't. There is a later test we pulled it all the way down 2,800 RPM just to see, but we didn't do that here. So you might argue maybe it would do better down here, the AFR, the 195 maybe, but nowhere from 47, I think, when we started this pool, did it ever do better. And even, let's say you had a 5,500 RPM peak engine. That's where your peak power occurred, which I don't know why you would. Even then, that's a big jump. Their slower airspeed, boom, boom, did make a difference. And the reason why is because I've been trying to, and I'm going to do a later video on Wednesday about this. There are other factors involved with cylinder heads besides just flow, besides just velocity. There's a bunch of factors. A lot of you are like, it's just velocity, it's just CSA, it's just CFM. No, it's not. It's like a lottery ticket. There are a lot of numbers in order for you to win. The same thing happens with a cylinder head. So that kind of explains some of this. I can already hear the hateful comments already. But anyway, let's go into the second one because this one's far more interesting. So it wasn't just this intake, because if we just tested that intake, it would be like, oh, well, big deal, right? We tested another one. The other one was the Victor Jr. That's this one. This son of a gun has got to be was the best one that I tested on the AFR Enforcers. And I tested like 13 or 14 different intake manifolds. This dude was king. So, well, let's look at their numbers now. Give me just a second. I'm pulling up stuff. There we go. So this is the with the AFR Enforcers, completely stock. Here's their numbers with the Victor Jr. It did 572 at 6,200 RPM and 537 or 540 foot-pounds of torque. Pretty good. That was the best one. Now, switching heads. 614 horsepower at 6,500 RPM, 549 foot-pounds of torque at 51. So, yeah, you can tell I got the air-fuel ratio working right now because it's about the same as what it is on that. Didn't change the jetting and carb in any of them. Just once the sensor starts working right, it looks better. But anyway, same setup, same tapered spacer, same 1,000 CFM carburetor. Nothing was changed. Putting back to back, that's a huge gain. We're now well over 600 horsepower from just a head swap. Now, you probably want to see the overlay, and I would too, because it's huge. Make sure I grab the right one. Yep. Oh, it's trick floor. Here we go. There's your overlay. So you got a black line, and the black line's the AFR Enforcers, the red line's the Promaxx. Yeah, that's obvious. That's a huge difference. And again, look at how much power difference is even at the lower RPMs. I'm sure if we track this all the way back, it's going to be the same case. That's a huge gain. So just switching heads, even though you're like, well, is the head too big? I'm worried about it being too big for me. Well, okay, when you make peak power at 5,000, you're still up. How about a peak of like 46? You're still up. It didn't make any difference. It just made more power, and that's a huge gain. Same cam, that's a big difference. So, for the record, of all the 4150 intakes tested so far, the Victor Jr. is the best one I've seen on this, which it's still stumping me. And I haven't tested a whole lot of the intake so far on this Promaxx deal. So obviously on the AFR, I tested like 13 or 14. This one so far has only been 5. And the reason for that is because I'm trying to see if maybe there's going to be a difference where the other intakes didn't work on the smaller head. Will now look really, really good on this head. So far, I could say the Victor Jr. looked good on this one, and it still looks great on this one, because it did beat the other ones I've already tested, which was kind of a bit of a shock. It's strange. So, but anyway, I do want to show you that overlay. One more thing before I leave you today. Let me find it again. Where are you? There you are. Just to give you an idea. That black line, these are both the Promaxx Project X 215 heads. This black line is the Trick Flow R intake. The red line is the Victor Jr. So that intake, which looks super racy, looks like it's gonna kick some ass. That intake looks like it got it at a garage sale for 25 bucks because the guy's trying to get rid of it because he's just divorced his wife. That much difference. Yeah, I know. Strange, isn't it? Crazy, crazy, crazy. That's a huge difference. Now, I will say this. This is one of the things I did learn. Going from the AFR Enforcer to the Promaxx Project X, when we tested all those intakes on those AFR Enforcers, the difference might be 4 horsepower. So from the top, I think top 6, you could say it was within 8. Even the lower half, you might have been off 20. This one so far, look at that. That's a huge difference. That's almost 15. So the intakes, now that the heads make more power, the intake difference is getting larger. So the ones from being bad to good are making a huge difference. But anyway, I do appreciate you watching this video. Keep watching so the channel could keep growing and more people can experience this. There will be other stuff about this because I'm not done talking about this dyno test because I still tested the Dominator intakes with it finally. And I tested another low profile intake, 4150. And you should really, those will be coming up in future videos. I do plan to go back on the dyno. The next dyno session I'm gonna do with the stock heads is I'm going to do the tunnel ram on it. So I'm gonna do my tunnel ram, test that. I'm also gonna put the RPM air gap back on it, see which one actually makes more torque. And then I'm gonna cut out the cloverleaf on this Dominator right here and see what that actually does. And some other things like that. So that'll be coming up. I don't know when, but the next videos I've already got done as far as the testing anyway. So on Wednesday, I'm probably gonna do stuff about porting. And if you don't agree with something I say, it's okay not to agree. I'm not perfect and I make plenty of mistakes. And that's why I say I'm no Superman, and you guys take care.